Hello and welcome to our first lesson of APUS history or regular US history. If you're following along in the APUSH curriculum, this is called topic 1.1 and it's contextualizing period 1. So, your learning objective, according to the College Board, is to explain the context for European encounters in the Americas from 1491 to 1607. Each of your units will actually start off with a similar lesson. Each unit starts off with a contextualization topic. So, we're going to dig into just briefly what is contextualization, and then we're going to talk about the world before 1492 in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. So, what is contextualization? Here's the language from the College Board to analyze the context of historical events, developments, or purposes. So, what we want to think about here is what is setting the stage for this unit? What is life like in America or in a specific region or in regards to society? What is life like prior to the first lesson? And so when I explain this to my students, I think about, if you've ever played a game of dominoes and you have your domino set up, and when you knock over the first domino, the rest fall over. And so with this lesson, we're looking at the first domino. What is life like before that sets the stage for the rest of our lesson? So, the world before 1492, if we're looking at Europe, there is a lot of devastation happening. There was the Hundred Years' War, the Black Death, and so these just two catastrophes left the population completely decimated. Due to that, and as well as very significant amounts of death at birth, the life expectancy was only in the 30s. We see limited trade going on and a feudal system in which the wealth is really concentrated for the few at the top. So there's widespread poverty, disease is spreading, and religion is incredibly important. At this time, before 1492, Catholicism is the main religion throughout Europe. Additionally, there's going to be a significant amount of religious conflict that is developing in our 1400s and early 1500s. So, what we see happening is the influence of Islam begin to take over in Europe or in parts of Europe as the city of Constantinople is taken over and becomes Istanbul. We see new routes being restricted for trade. And so this area here becomes more restricted to it's open to Muslims, but not to the Christian Europeans. And so land-based trade is going to become much more difficult. Additionally, we see the Protestant Reformation beginning, and this is where we see Martin Luther beginning in Germany and then in other parts of Europe as well, split from the Catholic Church and create the Lutheran Church and then various other Protestant groups. And what this is going to do is it's going to fuel competition between countries. So as one country remains Catholic and another becomes Protestant, it's going to fuel that competition between each region. Moving on to Asia. In regards to the four continents that we will be looking at, Asia will be the most unified continent, and there is significant contact between the nations. So we see culture being adaptations occurring in different regions due to this contact. This is probably the wealthiest overall region in the world at this time. And we do see increasing trade networks between India, Europe, and Africa. Specifically, we see the Silk Road becoming really important. So this is the trade route, the land-based trade route that is occurred that does include parts of Europe, Africa, and Asia. And the difficulty of this route is what ends up leading to a lot of the exploration that we see happening in the 1490s and beyond. Looking at Africa, Africa was not isolated before 1492 like the Americas. In fact, especially North Africa was already significantly connected to Europe. And so through through the Mediterranean Sea, we see a lot of trade occurring. We see the Portuguese especially taking advantage of the trade opportunities within Africa. We see coastal empires being particularly adept with trade, as they have to find ways to bring resources all the way across the Saharan desert. And so the main aspects of trade will be, or the main goods that are traded will be gold, ivory, salt, and slaves, and the results of metalworking. We see the spread of Islam occur as a result of this trade, and we do see immense wealth in these empires. So, for those of you that have already taken world history, you're probably fairly familiar with this wealth. But for some students who are taking U.S. history before world history, there's some misconceptions about the wealth in Africa prior to 1492. And that's something you would definitely dig into more in your world history class. Of course, in regards to American history, the primary initial encounters with Africa will be over the transatlantic slave trade. And there's some details about that that are important to know in context, and that's that it doesn't begin with European conquest into the Americas. It existed for over 1,000 years. And this is really because Africans didn't consider themselves as a collective group. They consider themselves as individuals, part of tribes, similar to the way American Indians viewed themselves. And so the way that the slave system happened was that Africans would be enslaved for a variety of reasons. And so when the Portuguese came in, that system was already there, and the Portuguese then just built it up and created a transatlantic slave trade. In regards to the Americas, we see incredible diversity in languages and cultures, a significant number of independent societies. Initially, those societies will be it's hard to really come up with broad terms to explain their commonalities. But when you look at the climate and environment, you can see that geography impacts the way that groups live. So people living in the American Southwest and in the Mexico region are going to have more similarities than they would with the Eastern woodland cultures or the Southeast. And so when you're looking at American history, the curriculum is going to divide it into these 4 regions. And so the next lesson in this YouTube channel will actually cover some of those commonalities. Prior to the Europeans, population estimates were from 50 to 100 million, which is more than Europe and Africa, but less than Asia. And there were trade routes that existed throughout the entire continent. So you would see that, those goods being accessed throughout the entire continent. So your learning objective for this lesson is to explain the context for European encounters in the Americas from 1491 to 1607. What that really means is, can you describe what life was like around the world before those European encounters? And hopefully by dividing it up by those 4 regions, you can have a few details for each.